James, my cereal. You can catch me at the Dare from Monist. Shout out to the Monist gang. Okay, cool. So when people come to me during book club sessions, happiness seems to be a burning goal for them, so I figured let's explore the data on this topic. So what is happiness? From the scientific definition, happiness is referred to as hedonia, which is the presence of positive emotions and the absence of negative emotions. So why does this feeling elude so many people? From an evolutionary biological viewpoint, we have evolved to have a negative bias, and that was important for our survival back then. We lived on trees and we were prey animals to almost everything. So when something negative happened, our brains evolved to make a big deal out of it so that we don't have to go through it again. And that in part is the reason why we developed the memory capabilities that we have now. However, these brain circuits that we used back then to assess negative events are still very active within us right now. This is shown in Katarina Blom's work, who is a renowned psychologist who shows how a setback in your life has a stronger emotional pull than a positive event. So it will hurt more for you to lose 50 Rand, and it will have more of an emotional effect than for you to receive a free 50 Rand. See, the negative bias we have evolved to have was such a blessing in disguise in those primitive times for survival, but they're just not suitable for the way we view our lives and relationships today. So let's discuss sources of happiness. Everyone who comes to me searching for happiness, first and only solution, no matter the age, race or class, believe that they will be happy when they make more money. So let's see what the data says. Professor Dan Gilbert's work has shown that money and happiness have a positive correlation, however a weak correlation. An increase of income will make you happier, however that seems to stop once you start earning around $40,000 to $70,000 a year, and then money ceases to have any impact whatsoever on your happiness. So psychologists such as Dr. Jordan Peterson interpret these results as, it's not that money makes you happy, because if that was the case, if you got $1 million, you'd be 1,000,000 times happier. But it's more that when you get more money, you keep debt collectors away. And debt collectors is a source of anxiety. Getting rid of them would make you more joyful. Looking at this data set, it would be a mistake for someone as young as 20 to delay their happiness for when they have it all figured out and when they're financially stable sometime in the future. The data shows that you'll be disappointed carrying out this strategy. However, there are things you can do with money right now that can add to your happiness. Professor Elizabeth Dan's studies show that people generate genuine happiness by spending money on someone else other than themselves. So most people hear this and deny it, but think about it. When you're in a relationship and you're in love and you do a gesture for your partner on their birthday, or a gesture for your mom on Mother's Day, just to make that other person smile, ask yourself, how do you feel in that moment? This data set is showing that giving generates happiness is multicultural, as a sample group is not only rich Western countries like USA and Canada, but she conducted her studies also and extracted sample groups in relatively poor countries like Uganda and got the same results that genuine giving adds to a state of happiness. So give. It's an unavoidable part of the human experience, and you'll be punished for ignoring it. Professor Elizabeth Dan took it a step further and linked with the charity named Karma Currency. And essentially what they do is, imagine if a huge supermarket like Pick n Pay wanted to donate to a charity, and instead of just sending off one big payment, it divides the payment in fragments in the form of vouchers and gives those vouchers to employees to donate to whatever charity they would like through Karma Currency. The results of this study showed that allowing employees to participate in social responsibility increased job satisfaction and workers' performance. Just the act of giving matters. Giving is crucial to happiness at a biological level, and this can be argued because Elizabeth tested giving and happiness relationship with toddlers and found the exact same results. Okay, cool, so moving on. In the self-development world, you hear self-development gurus saying happiness is a choice. So we're going to explore what the science has to say about that right now. Jen Kelsang Nyema, who uses a Buddhist perspective and is a self-development guru, He explains happiness by using an analogy where our minds are like balloons in the wind. When things go our way, we're happy, but when things don't, we are unhappy. So as long as we outsource happiness within the restriction of when things go our way, then clearly happiness is not up to us. And as long as it's an external world event, then we can't control it and your happiness is unstable. He says happiness and unhappiness is a state of mind and therefore it's an internal thing. Fun fact, the data supports the idea that happiness is a state of mind and a choice. This can be found in Professor Dan Gilbert's work. He's a leading scientist in the field of happiness at Harvard University. Prof. Dan Gilbert shows that there's two types of happiness. There's natural happiness and synthetic happiness. Natural happiness is when things go your way and you win money, for example. But synthetic happiness, which is measurable, is when you choose to be happy, accepting things you can't change and just being grateful. You may be tempted to think synthetic happiness is less valued than natural happiness. However, they conducted a study consisting of two groups of people. The first group won millions of dollars at a lottery, which is a form of natural happiness. And the second group, they gathered paraplegic individuals. These two groups' happiness got measured a year after their events, and they had an approximation of the same level of happiness. Both types of happiness have the same positive effects on you. Synthesized happiness is not less than natural happiness, and multiple studies have been done to support this. The key thing here is our ability to be able to choose what makes us happy. You don't look for happiness, you synthesize it into your daily lives. This is supported by Katrina Blum, whose studies and work has shown that happiness is a skill you work on. Learning to give out gratitude is a habit that you build on. Happiness is not the size of one thing or one big event, but it's getting as many small joys as possible out of your day. Tal Ben-Shahar, a Harvard lecturer, argues, learning optimism prevents depression and mental anxiety. It increases the psychological immune system. The immune system doesn't mean you don't get sick. It just means you get sick much less. And that is something very important to remember. Moving on to another key source of happiness. And if you ignore this source of happiness, it's one-way ticket to mental health challenges. The second most important source of happiness are relationships. Like genuine social relationships with family, friends, a partner, so forth and so on. Professor Dancha Katna shows humans feel good in life when they feel connected to other people. It will give you an extra 10 years of life expectancy compared to those who don't feel connected to the social structure. Fun fact, relationships are one of the best predictors on life expectancy and do much better as a predictor than eating red meat, drinking alcohol and smoking. The need for genuine relationships seeps down to a biological level you can't ignore. Your social life has a direct impact on your nervous system. Funny enough, this is a Darwinian prediction on the survival of the kindest. Darwin argued that sympathy will have been increased through natural selection for those communities which included the greatest number of the most sympathetic members would flourish best, and rear the greatest number of offspring. Close quotes. There's a biological evolutionary basis to this. It's not about the quantity of relationships. It doesn't matter how many people you know, but it's more important about the quality of those relationships, being able to be vulnerable and honest. And I think in part that's why there's mental health issues spike today, because we live in an age where there's an individualism myth, where it's almost cool to need no one. To add on to this, Prof. Dan Gilbert has shown that successfully married people are not only happier than unmarried people, but live longer and healthier lives. Another source of happiness stated by John Stuart Mill, a philosopher and a political economist, with an IQ score ranging from 180 to 200, and that's a very rare IQ score, probably top 20 most intelligent people to ever live according to Business Insider. He says, we're only happy when we fix our mind on a goal or purpose and we pursue that goal, and every time we take steps towards that goal, we generate nuggets of happiness. We do that every single day and you create a happy life. Psychologists' data support this over and over. An example of this is your brain has a part called the hippocampus. This part of the brain alerts you if it's a good idea for you to be calm or anxious or fearful based off the preset goals that you have placed for yourself. In other words, it compares what you want to happen and what is actually happening. And if there's a mismatch, you get psychologically and neurochemically punished for it, and you feel anxious, for example. And there are other parts of your brain where if you take actions and steps towards your goal, dopamine is released at every small successful step and you're neurochemically rewarded and permitted happiness. And this is especially true for me. In 2015 I was in a dark place and I could have made a lot of permanent mistakes in that year. And in 2016 I came across this type of information, and the first thing it taught me was to set a goal. And like clockwork, once I did and started actively going towards it, I escaped the mental hell within a month. And of course that story I just told is simplified and everyone's path is different, but believe me, without a goal you're just in hell or a step away from it. Dr. Samuel Johnson in the 17th century, a famous English writer, once wrote, "Our miseries are comparative and not due to the presence of any real evil, but the absence of a fictitious good." Hypocritically, I'll enter the next source of happiness, which is exercise. Duke Medical School took 156 major depressive, suicidal, non-motivated students and divided them into 3 groups. The first group was instructed to exercise, another group was instructed to take medication and exercise, and the third group was just instructed to take medication like drugs to fight off depression. The first 2 groups exercised for 30 minutes 3 times a week. They followed these groups for 4 months. Remember, these are patients who fit the major depressive patients category. The group that took the medicine only without exercise had a success rate of 67% of them escaped their depressive state. The group that exercised only had a success rate of 66%. And the group that exercised and took medicine had a success rate of 67%. So all 3 groups improved and did well. But here's the kicker. The group that exercised, it took longer for them to heal and leave their depressive state, but once they got out of it, it sustained for much longer. So after 6 months, the psychologists looked at the relapse rates of all 3 groups. Those who took medication only, 38% of them relapsed 10 months later into major depression again. The group that consisted of medication and exercise had 31% of the people relapsing 10 months later, while the people who exercised only had only 9% people relapsing back into a major depressive state. This study has been replicated. Now, it's important to know exercise helped just as much as medication. That's not at all saying you should remove medication if you have been diagnosed with medication. That is not what I'm saying at all. However, I'm saying it's important to add exercise in your daily routine as it impacts your happiness. Tal Ben-Shahar interprets the results of this study as he doesn't see exercise as taking an antidepressant, but more like not exercising as taking a depressant, because that's not how human beings were built. We weren't meant to be couch potatoes. We were built to be active, and being non-active hurts the physical and the psychological framework, which puts us in a depressive state and steals our happiness. Cool, so moving on. A lot of belief systems carry the idea that you need to be present to experience peace and joy. That's interesting because according to a study by Professor Dan Gilbert and Matthew Killingsworth, our minds wander 46.9% of the time we spend awake, because thoughts are kinda automatic and they kinda have a life of their own. So in other words, that's 46.9% of the time awake you're rehearsing future conversations, or 46.9% of the time awake you're just in the past thinking about different events and not being present. And that's why happiness eludes a lot of people, because When you wonder, people's minds always tend to wander to the worst case scenario. And this is supported because your brain has a part called the frontal lobe, and within it is the frontal cortex, which is a simulator of future events. So pilots use simulators so they don't make mistakes in real life. In the same way, humans use the frontal cortex for the same reason. But however, that comes with what is called the impact bias, which is a tendency of the simulator to work badly. So it will over-exaggerate a good event or over-exaggerate a bad event, like you losing a romantic partner and thinking how you're going to live without them. So being present is important for you to attain happiness. And meditation is an art form that teaches you how to be present. Being present also means synthesizing your happiness in the now, and not say you'll be happy when you receive a job. That is a choice, and you just made that choice to postpone your happiness. Let go of the pursuit of happiness and be an expression of it. Okay, cool. So I'm going to conclude now. And I'm going to conclude by Tal Ben-Shahar idea of happiness. He says happiness is for him is the intersection between meaning and pleasure. So for example, he uses politics and how to him politics is important and meaningful, but it's not pleasurable. He uses lying on the beach. That may be pleasurable to him, but it's not meaningful. And you can't sustain happiness without pleasure and meaning intersecting. And this is supported because the data shows that a source of happiness are the goals you set that are aligned with your personal interest and value structure. So the wisdom you can draw from that is, don't use other people's metric of happiness to measure what's happiness for you, because other people have their own value structure and personal interest. So you trying to copy them will result in you being neurochemically punished severely for it. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "There's a time in a man's education he must learn that envy is ignorance and limitation is suicide." We all have different personality traits. Trying to be someone else is a thief of happiness. Do what makes you happy. And I'm cognizant of the fact that not everyone has the opportunity right now to do what they deem meaningful and love for a living. But research shows that even if it's 30 minutes a day or 2 hours in your weekend that you go and paint, if that's what makes you happy and is meaningful and pleasurable for you, whatever that thing is, it trickles down to all other areas of your life and you become more productive. Synthesize your happiness. Remain present and in gratitude. James, my serial. You can catch me at the Diary from Monist. If you enjoy this content, please, I really appreciate your subscription. So yeah, it's obvious that I'm struggling to have a timetable that fits well within my life for the upload. So videos are being uploaded erratically. So it's a good idea for you to turn on the notification bell so you know when I do post up. I'm truly grateful for your attention. Thank you.